I'm not exactly sure if previous to this video I've covered Tubi originals on this channel. I know I've kept note of many of the ones that have been advertised over the past couple of months. I definitely have some names, again, as I said, jotted down, but I will be looking at in the future at some point. I think I might have covered one or two, though, previously. No, I think they were, maybe. I'm not exactly sure, but either way, it's still relatively early days, if not a starting point for me to cover Tubi exclusive content, which, of course, that's normal for many streaming services. They're all, of course, trying to carry their own original projects. They're not already doing so. I mean, many are. And why should Tubi be left out? And I do imagine that with this release, this is going to be more accessible than perhaps maybe some other networks. Because, I mean, as far as, streaming networks, we're all on a good plethora of them these days, and the cost does rank up. But the reason I say this is probably a little more accessible is because Tubi, even though I'm not as familiar with their original content, I'm very familiar with the service. I use it quite often. It's free. Who doesn't love free stuff? Especially when you look back in your transaction records and you see just how much you spent in total on other streaming content for other services, it ranks up in price. But with Tubi, other than internet costs, you don't have that issue. And maybe some of the fare, I mean, I've covered Tubi content in the past, or stuff that's been carried on Tubi, and I've seen a general mix from what I've watched on the service. Some projects are good, others are not. When you say free, it carries a whole lot with it. Bed Rest sounds like a very competent release, so I would be inclined to believe it's good. And it speaks to me as a project in regard to preferences, not just on the note of it being free. I love thrillers. And the atmosphere of horror films as well, even though I have a lot of conditions when it comes to the horror genre, I tend to prefer thrillers. There's some overlap, again, in tone between the two genres. It's the suspense angle that I love in thriller projects, and it's oftentimes a genre that I find myself gravitating to as fast as possible in comparison to perhaps others. But even more specific than that, I love psychological stuff. And this is a psychological thriller. I would give it that attribution. I mean, they call it horror on IMDb. It's, I see shades of how it might be, but it's definitely got that thriller undertone of the suspense and the unnerving type of story. But it sounds quite good. Very endearing on a pitch. If you've not heard of Bed Rest yet, and it's a good name, this is what it says according to the IMDb synopsis. A pregnant woman on bed rest begins to wonder if her house is haunted or if it's all in her head. And I'm also saying in regards to this project, I did forget to mention this, the poster recognizes that this is getting a cinematic debut in theaters as of December 8th, although it also says December 7th, so maybe in some theaters it's getting that early preview. Netflix has that, option carved out for them with some of their content, in that you see in a couple of their projects, have a simultaneous they're not simultaneous. I think they debut in theaters first, and then they go to the platform for streaming. Tubi's getting that type of treatment. I mean, that must be really interesting. I'm sure definitely bragging rights for them. I mean, this project also has it already, given that the poster says that this is from the producers of Scream, and I believe that's referencing the newest one. And I liked that movie. I thought it was pretty good. I've now caught up on all the Scream movies in preparation for Scream 6, so I'm looking forward to, seeing that one when it arrives. But Scream 5 I thought was entertaining. Not perfect, but it was fun. It was a good thriller, nonetheless, and a good horror experience. This sounds really good, though, on a pitch. I mean, you've got a woman who's in, a very uplifting situation, although it's certainly a physically taxing one. I believe this is happening, because it's saying she's pregnant, so this isn't necessarily in the recovery period. Otherwise, it may specify that after her pregnancy, this woman's on bed rest. It's saying it's, I believe, in the midst of the pregnancy, and that's understandable. I mean, what woman couldn't relate? Especially when perhaps it's getting closer to term. I like this idea, though, again, of it. It's literally... It's a confined thriller. I mean, I love smaller set types of projects, and with smaller movies but projects that have less resources to spend from, so they're smaller fare, you tend to see more of a reliance in creating smaller entertainment. But it gives it a bit of an edge in comparison to maybe some other thrillers where you're like, maybe the vastness of your scenery may be a bit much, and you might have a thriller that's stretched in different directions versus a confined thriller that's happening in a very small space, but they use it to their maximum occupancy. I hope that's the case with this. I mean, she's literally confined to a bed. So you're talking about a small film right there, but there's a psychological angle about what she's experiencing while she's on bed rest, where perhaps that's where the horror undertone could come in. I mean, maybe it's going to reside more in the thriller territory, or it's going to go the horror direction. Maybe more paranormal when they say haunted, maybe supernatural. I mean, we'll see what my thoughts are. I'll judge the project according to my horror conditions when we get to the end and get a better realization for the trailer, but it's a very enthralling pitch. And I don't think I've seen any work from Laurie Evans-Taylor, although I believe maybe I've covered some projects that she's done. I'm not exactly sure. From production standpoint, she's done a lot of TV work, and she did write this movie and direct it. I haven't seen anything yet. So and she has an acting background as well. So fresh watch for me in many regards. Some of the talent even here, I'm sure maybe that'd be the case for the actors and actresses as well. Let's go ahead and get a look at this movie. But again, I think there's enough of a, baseline of good traits to it that enthrall me. All right, here we go. A to-be original with a cinematic debut. Here we go. Let's see how effective bed rest is.
For you and your husband and the baby, it is the beginning of a new era.
I want you on bed rest for the duration of your pregnancy.
And now for a well-earned rest.
Is there a medical complication for... Oh, really? STX movies? I like their stuff.
9 months is not long in
STX Films, because their actual name.
But if you're
very
like the
modern
average mother-to-be, you'll be waiting. And waiting. Those last weeks do seem to drag a little.
Yeah.
You want to play?
Believably. Uh-oh. I'm interested to see where this is going.
Try to keep your mind free of worry.
Promising attributions from a
Breathe
response.
slowly.
I've been hearing things. There's something going on in this house.
Hey, cats always make for a good
Helpful
thriller,
doses
don't
of
they?
medicine may be given to you if you need them. To give you a peaceful state of mind. Try to relax. You won't be alone in your room. Take it as easy as you can. Everybody gets a little impatient. Don't let that bother you. Now, what is happening inside your body? Breathe slowly.
This is really good. Again, in terms of using space.
What a wonderful thing to give life to a new being. Try to relax. And so you rest.
Literally, that is a strong thriller. I mean, from a trailer standpoint, I mean, again, with trailers, it might be hit or miss. You never know. Sometimes when you get to the movie, you're like, maybe it was a different story. I really like this. It's very effective. Like I said, confined thriller. She's literally in this. Well, I guess it kind of expands. You've got the stages where she's in the hospital and she's with the doctor. So there is some traveling with the movie that does have a bit of a broad range in regards to the environment. But it's mostly contained when it comes to the suspense within the house, largely, and more specifically the bedroom. I think that's great. From the scares, I mean, it definitely feels like it's in a jump scare space. Who doesn't like that, though? I mean, some people maybe don't like the excessive jump scares. I mean, I get that, but I am a jump scare junkie, so that type of angle personally appeals to me. I think it looks quite good. I mean, the performances are great, the music choices were excellent, and it feels very modern, right? The Roomba, if that is a Roomba. The fact that she's feeding the cat, or she's feeding herself grapes with a mechanical arm, that's hilarious to me. But wouldn't that work if you're confined to bed rest? I mean, that's understandable perhaps for her position. I mean, sure, she didn't necessarily want the pregnancy to be that complicated, but maybe there's some sort of underlying medical issue that would risk the baby's health. I wonder when it comes to the horror direction. It's a very suspenseful thriller, and there are the horror undertones in regards to some of the jump scares as they pop up. There are some really effective ones, though. I mean, like the closet and the way it's filmed. I mean, again, the attributions. Scream, of course, that got people's attention. It was a good movie. Suspiria, I heard good things about. Isn't it that Luca Guadagnino movie? I might have that wrong. I think that's his. And then Ready or Not. I read about that. I had a friend that went to see that movie. I know people liked that for the most part. I know people were giving credits, especially the people involved with the production of it and the writing, and maybe the directing. I forget on that note. I didn't like the overall direction of the movie. I didn't watch it in particular because of the ending, what I read about. It got a bit into when you're talking about horror for me when it comes to convictions, I'm not as much of a gore fan. Unless it's like done sparingly or in an artistic manner that's not too gratuitous, right? Not like a slasher film for the most part. Maybe I've made some exceptions where I feel like it's tolerable. It depends on the movie though. But when it comes to specifically horror films, paranormal I'm okay with, but the supernatural direction, being a Christian, I'm very sensitive to that. And so for me, I don't tend to embrace anything that comes across to me as like demonic or themed around the occult. That's usually a deterrent for me for the most part, like maybe 99% of the time. I just don't find that entertaining because it, for me, is a very realistic concept. And plus, I tend to prefer just the suspenseful atmosphere of a horror film. That's kind of my thing. And plus, the supernatural thing feels like it's being done to death these days. I mean, some might do it well, but it just feels like a go-to for every horror artist. But again, like I said, paranormal I'm okay with for the most part. And this certainly has a paranormal edge. I'm wondering if part of the result of this story, because most of this, again, is happening in the context of a pregnancy, I'm wondering if the destination of this movie rests around the baby being consequential to why her experience is horrific, or if there's something that's happening in the house. I'm wondering if the baby's the center of that. We'll see. That's been existent in other types of film fare that I can't really name on the top of my head, but I'm familiar with, right? You've got a baby that poses problems. We'll see. I think it's very well presented, though. It's structured nicely. The production value in regards to the set, again, I love the confined approach, and it is a very suspenseful movie. STX Films has pointed out, and I've seen some of their stuff even in the thriller territory. Let's say, for example, The Boy. Loved that movie. And I think they did the sequel as well, right? I also liked that, too. I know it didn't get as good of a response. I actually liked both. Different extremes, but I really enjoyed those movies on a craft perspective and on the production value. And I sense the same enjoyment here on that note. What are your guys' thoughts with Bed Rest? I think that appears to me, at least in the context of the trailer, as a quite competent thriller. It's on Tubi, so we'll see. It could be a mixture of response, but it's also getting a cinematic presence. That says something, at least. Or maybe the studio just really wants to get as much money as they can. They're like, okay, well, Tubi doesn't cost anything. We'll see. Maybe I'll even try to watch it in theaters. How would you feel about it? Would you ever watch this in theaters or on streaming? What is this signal for you? I could see it, appealing to both audiences. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. I'll at least entertain it on a watch. And maybe, if the opportunity comes up, I'll be able to review it. We'll see. I'm working on I want to start opening this channel to other destinations again in regards to responding to film fare. So reviews, I'm considering it. I haven't given it much thought, and no permanent decisions made right now. It's just something I'm kind of mulling over. But maybe I'll consider it with Bed Rest. We'll see. But at least from what I can see from the trailer, I'm geared to watch it. We'll see how other people feel as well on it, but I'm curious. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.